actually play for 5 more years if he wanted to. And then earlier in the season, he said, guess what, I may retire, after next season. So with all that in mind, and now we have this injury, how does this impact Kobe's future?
Well, first of all, I think it eliminates the prospect of 5 additional years. That's number one. Number two, and more importantly, what we have to understand about Kobe is that playing the game is relatively easy for him. He doesn't, of course, he says he could play 4 or 5 more years because he knows and believes in his sleep he can average 20. The problem for Kobe Bryant in terms of him contemplating retirement is all the work that he has to put into to have himself at an elite level where he can do what he does on a night-in, night-out basis. That's his problem. So the fact that he's torn his Achilles, as Skip has alluded to, I had a cracked kneecap in half. I never tore the Achilles. But you listen to anybody who's endured that, they talk about how it's a living hell. Like it's so incredibly difficult to deal with. Knowing that, you have to ask yourself, like he alluded to on his Facebook page, do I really want to go through this? Go through all of this stuff that it's going to take me to prepare to get myself back to where I'm accustomed to being. Because understand something, Skip, and this is very, very important. Michael Jordan modified his game, as you well know, and changed it once the athleticism dissipated. And he had to rely more on his savvy, his know-how, his cerebral approach to the game, along with that jump shot. You have to understand that Michael Jordan just found a different way to beat you and to be effective. Kobe Bryant, believe it or not, is a tad bit different because as effective as he could make himself to be, he doesn't want to be around for us to witness that dissipation, even in the athleticism department. Yeah. So if the Achilles is everything that you and others who've endured it have said it is, then it's going to take something significant away from him physically. And even if he can still go out there and average 25 a game and stuff like that, he's not going to want to sit around doing that for too long because he knows eventually it's going to catch up to him.
Okay, so bottom line to this question, the answer is unknowable. I have no idea how Kobe's going to be able to bounce back. Do we both agree this is the ultimate workout warrior in Kobe Bryant? Yes. With Tim Grover at his side, if you give anybody a shot to come back faster than ever, it's this guy. Stephen A., let's look at what happens. I told you it's the most mysterious, debilitating injury of all. And it's the longest, hardest rehab. They say 6 to 9 months. Who knows what it could be. But the problem is always rebuilding your confidence to be able to push off it and trust that it won't pop again. And it could take 8 or 9 months, which is going to leak into next year, which means next year could be kind of a lost cause for Kobe and the Lakers. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it could actually extend how many years Kobe ultimately plays, because he may not be able to bounce back full throttle Kobe until age 36 and 37. And would I be surprised if Kobe's playing at 36? No, I wouldn't surprise me at all. Yeah. So maybe you'll get a couple of more years longer term than you would have. But let's look real quick, Stephen A. Isaiah Thomas, the great Zeke,
32.
pops his Achilles at 32 and tried to come back and just quit. He retired at 32. God bless him. Dominic.
Yeah, it's different though, Skip.
Yeah.
Technology, different time.
Yeah. Somewhat, but you're
20 years
right.
ago.
I hope you're right. Dominic pops his at 32. He comes back and makes 2 All-Star teams, so it's possible there. We look at Elton Brand. His goes at age 28. He'd made 2 All-Star teams. Now he's come back from it. Last 5-6 years, not great, Stephen A. He lost a lot because of the Achilles. We see Norm Nixon going way back, have to retire. I can go on and on. It's unpredictable and unknowable. So do I think Kobe can start next year 100% Kobe that we just saw? I don't.
No, it's not possible.
Because
here's the thing.
he is human.
Stop, but here's the problem. They need to stop that nonsense. He might miss training camp, but he could get back for the beginning of the season. Stop that. Just stop it. That's ridiculous. And I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm saying it's not advisable to do it.
Yeah.
He needs to take his time. But the reason why I'm not worried about Kobe on that level, Skip, is because in the end, he doesn't want you to see him as a shell of himself.
I understand.
See, that's the difference. He doesn't want it.
Yeah.
He would rather sit out
Until he's 100, yeah.
and miss games than for you to come back, than for him to come back and we look at him and say, you know what? He's done.
All right, Stephen,
Kobe,
let's talk
you don't
about
want to see
this. Mike D'Antoni told USA Today talking about Kobe's injuries that he didn't believe there was any connection with his excessive minutes. So let's take a look at this quote. It was the decision that we had to make at the time, and it was the decision that was made with Kobe. He was very insistent on it. I was a little reluctant, but he said he could do it. He felt great. We kept checking every day with the trainers and him. Where are you? How are you? What are you doing? And to be honest with you, I don't think one has anything to do with the other. So, Stephen A., how does Kobe's injury, because obviously there are far-reaching implications, how does his injury impact D'Antoni's future?
Well, listen, let me say this first of all, addressing Mike D'Antoni's quote, y'all. That's ridiculous. It flies in the face. And I'm not talking about the Achilles. I'm talking about how you checked with him every day. He said he's okay. Forget the Achilles injury for a second. Overall, how many times, Skip, how many Laker games did you watch where you saw a third quarter, you saw a fourth quarter? Kobe had it. He could dig deep, but there was something inside of him. You saw him breathing a little heavy. He looked a little bit tired.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, we saw this years earlier playing for Phil Jackson.
Yeah.
Why would we not see this now? Of course we see it. The difference was Phil said, I need you to take a minute. Come sit over here.
Yeah.
Nah, Kobe. Kobe's like, no. Sit down.
Yeah.
He said, take some Gatorade, drink some water. It'll only be 60 seconds. It'll only be 2 minutes. Then you can come back in. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just like what Mike D'Antoni is missing here. And this is why it bothers me that he walks around so sensitive to what everybody says about him. Because it's that kind of nonsensical quote he just threw out there. You are a coach getting paid $4 million a year. You are the leader of the Los Angeles Lakers. What are you talking about? You checked with the trainers. Yeah, I'm saying, what are you talking about? You checked with the trainers. And no, I'm not blaming D'Antoni per se for the injury. I understand it could happen.
Okay.
But to act like, you know, you are completely absolved as a coach just because the dude said, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Over the course of 48 minutes, you're supposed to watch the game and say, you know what? I don't care what he's saying right now. I think he need a break. I'm going to need him for the 12 minutes of the fourth quarter, maybe the second quarter, maybe the third quarter. I'm going to give him this rest. That's my point. So to me, D'Antoni, to some degree, is on a hot seat because, let me be clear, people in L.A. don't want him. I'm just going to put it out there. People in L.A. want Phil. All right? That's number one. They want Phil. Number two, they don't like the way everything went down because even though they weren't the greatest Mike Brown fans in the world, 5 games in, they didn't like that. They didn't like the fact that when Mike D'Antoni first took over the job, he was open with the team about how defense ain't his thing. It's something he'll have to learn along the way. They didn't like the fact that 3 days on the job. He took the job on a Tuesday, Kerry, Laker lover, a job on a Tuesday. That Friday, he benched Pau Gasol. What has Pau Gasol been doing?
Right.
What he's been doing is what he did when they won 2 titles. So you got all of this residue of Mike D'Antoni's era in Los Angeles staring us in the face. And then he will issue a quote like that. It almost seems like he's just trying to absolve himself of culpability. When you're the coach, you're supposed to be the first to stand up and accept culpability. That's not what we're seeing here in terms of this quote, and that's my problem.
Okay, I hear you. And you remember we recently agreed that D'Antoni needed to help Kobe save his legs. Remember recently from the three-point line, Kobe Bryant went on a 1 for 21 slump. Remember that one?
Yes.
1 for 21 from 3. That's just tired legs. Can't get the lift into your three-point shot. Okay, now let's talk about D'Antoni's future. I think Kobe's injury, crazy as it sounds, I think it saved D'Antoni's job because it effectively it put it on hold for next year where Jim Buss doesn't have to immediately answer for a Kobe-led team collapsing in the playoffs. where, let's just say they play the Thunder and got swept, 5 games, whatever. Kobe wasn't very good last year. I'm sure he would be better this year. But let's say they got blown away by the Thunder. Well, then there'd be a real outcry in L.A. We want D'Antoni gone. And Stephen A., Jim Buss clearly doesn't want to have to pay Mike Brown and Mike D'Antoni
and
next year without, and another can Phil Jackson, without having 2 of them even coach at all. So I just say it'll put it on hold till next year where Jim Buss can get away with keeping D'Antoni into next year, because it just became a non-issue, because the only issue right now is when can Kobe come back.
But Stephen, you said they have to deal with the issue of Dwight Howard. And if they can push that situation, Dwight Howard could say, I don't want D'Antoni.
Well, Kerry, thank you for bringing that back up, because this is very important as well. If you remember, one of the things I forgot to add was when D'Antoni benched Pau Gasol 3 days on the job. Remember, as a Laker lover, in the immediate aftermath of that, Dwight Howard was missing those free throws, shooting at 46%. People asked D'Antoni, why don't you bench Dwight Howard? His response was, you don't do that to a franchise player. You ride that wave. You take care of him. You show faith in him. That's what he said. Well, if that's the case, why the last week of the season are you and Dwight Howard in the newspapers essentially feuding because Dwight Howard is saying, could you feed the big boy the ball? Maybe that will help improve our defense because we'll slow down the game. We'll have sets. We're running the ball inside out. And as a result, it will put us in a position to get back on defense, get set, and position ourselves to defend better. Okay? D'Antoni was like, yeah, I heard him, and was dismissive of it. So 1 minute you're praising him and talking about he's the franchise. The next minute, you're at odds with him in terms of feeding him the basketball. But this is the dude y'all want to re-sign to max dollars because he's the cornerstone of your franchise in the future. So now you've got a situation where potentially D'Antoni could be alienating Dwight Howard without even realizing it because he's in his own world. And as a result, going into free agency with the Atlanta Hawks telling everybody they're going to pursue Dwight Howard, with Dwight Howard's father wanting him to come back home to Atlanta, with Houston, with James Harden, Jeremy Lin, Chandler Parsons and those boys, all right, which, by the way, Kevin McHale doing an outstanding job coaching them, and they're young. And it's a tax-free state that is Texas. That's an option. Dallas, another tax-free state. I mean, obviously it's the same state as Texas, but they're another tax-free team. They've got that option. So if you've got these options, you would think that D'Antoni would be aware of this and make sure he made the big boy happy. Okay. But that hasn't happened.
Okay, but would Dwight demand to stay in L.A. that D'Antoni be fired?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think Dwight wants that on him this time the way it was in Orlando.
You're right, but remember, I don't believe so either. But unlike times in the past, he's listening to his agent now. Dan Fagan is one of the most reputable agents in the game of basketball. You work behind the scenes, who knows what's possible. This is if you had left it to Dan Fagan all along, instead of listening to your parents and friends, you might have been in Brooklyn. Keep that in mind.
We'll keep it in mind. We'll leave it right there while we